The Great Hall of the Galactic Alliance buzzed with nervous energy. Representatives from 12 advanced species sat around the massive oval table, their faces illuminated by the soft blue glow of holographic displays, showing the latest attack by the Vorn Empire. "Another world falls," announced Praetor, the tall, gray-skinned chairman of the council. "The peaceful Eldar colony on Proxima 7 has gone silent. This marks the 5th planet to fall in just 30 standard days." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Vorn Empire, once thought to be a minor power from the Outer Rim, had suddenly emerged as a terrifying force, methodically conquering worlds that lay at the edge of Alliance space. Captain James Miller, the human representative, leaned forward in his seat. Unlike the other representatives with their ornate robes and ceremonial markings, Miller wore the simple blue uniform of the United Earth Fleet. His weathered face and steady gaze reflected his 20 years of service. "Honorable Chairman," Miller said, his voice calm but firm, "the pattern is clear. The Vorn are testing our resolve. They will continue taking undefended worlds until they meet resistance. Earth proposes immediate deployment of a joint defense force to protect the next likely targets." The chamber fell silent for a moment before erupting in dismissive laughter. The massive, 6-armed Diraxian representative waved his upper limbs in amusement. "Typical human response," the Diraxian said, "always seeing threats where patience is required. This is why your kind is considered the most fearful in the galaxy." Miller kept his expression neutral despite the sting of the insult. Humans had joined the Galactic Alliance only 70 years ago, and in that time had earned a reputation as overly cautious. Their insistence on safety protocols, risk assessments, and defensive technologies had been misinterpreted as cowardice by the older species. "It is not fear that motivates us," Miller countered. "It is responsibility. The people on these worlds cannot defend themselves against the Vorn. Every day we delay, another million innocent lives are lost." The elegant Thalaxian representative adjusted her shimmering veil. "The humans speak of responsibility yet have the least experience in galactic affairs. Perhaps if you understood the complex history of our region, you would not rush to military action." "I understand enough," Miller replied. "I understand that while we debate, people die." Chairman Praetor raised his hand for silence. "The Council will now vote on the human proposal for immediate military intervention." The vote was quick and decisive. 11 glowing orbs turned red for rejection. Only the human orb shone green. "The proposal is rejected," Praetor announced. "Instead, the Council approves further observation and diplomatic outreach to better understand the Vorn intentions." Miller stood up, his chair scraping against the polished floor. "And how many more worlds will fall while we observe? The Vorn have shown no interest in diplomacy. The humans' famous caution seems to have transformed into recklessness," remarked the Serpentine Vexor representative. "Perhaps your species should focus on your own defense rather than pushing the Alliance toward war." "We are not pushing for war," Miller said quietly. "We are pushing to prevent one." But his words fell on deaf ears. The Council had moved on to other matters, the fate of the border worlds already fading from their concern. Miller gathered his data pad and left the chamber, his footsteps echoing in the grand corridor. Outside, the artificial sky of the Alliance station glittered with projected stars. Miller touched the communication device on his wrist. "Admiral Reed, the Alliance has voted against intervention," he reported. After a pause, a woman's voice replied, "Understood, Captain. Return to Earth immediately. If the Alliance won't act, we may need to consider our options." "The Vorn won't stop at the outer worlds," Miller warned. "I know," Admiral Reed answered. "And when they come for Earth, we won't be counting on Alliance help. Safe journey, Captain." As Miller headed toward the docking bay, he knew that humanity stood alone. But standing alone was something humans had learned to do well. The United Earth Government headquarters in Geneva hummed with activity. Emergency lights cast a soft red glow across the faces of military and civilian leaders gathered in the main war room. Large screens displayed the advancing Vorn forces, showing a clear pattern of conquest, moving steadily through the outer systems. Admiral Lisa Reed stood at the head of the oval table, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun. At 62, she had seen humanity rise from a single-planet species to a minor power in the galactic community. Now she faced the most difficult decision of her career. Captain Miller's report confirms what we suspected, she said, gesturing to the man who had just returned from the Alliance meeting. The other species will not act until the Vorn are at their doorstep. By then, it will be too late. The defense minister shook his head. If we move against the Vorn without Alliance support, we risk diplomatic isolation. The Alliance Charter clearly states that unilateral military action is grounds for expulsion. And if we do nothing? Asked Miller, still standing in his travel-worn uniform. The people on Tellus 4 and Barium Prime will face the same fate as the others. Total subjugation, or worse. President Tom Wilson, a tall man with dark skin and deep-set eyes, studied the holographic star map. The 12 worlds of human colonies glowed blue, tiny compared to the vast territories of the older Alliance species. We're not a large power, Wilson said quietly. Our fleet is designed for defense, not extended campaigns. Reed nodded. True, Mr. President. But we have something the Vorn aren't expecting. Ships and crews trained to operate independently. Unlike the Alliance forces, our captains don't need to wait for a committee vote to make tactical decisions. The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Humans had been mocked for their cautious approach to space travel, their insistence on redundant systems, and their constant preparation for worst-case scenarios. But those same traits had produced a fleet that could function without constant support. The Alliance calls us cowards, Miller said, breaking the silence. They laugh at our safety protocols and emergency drills. But right now, being prepared for disaster might be exactly what's needed. President Wilson walked slowly around the table, looking at each person in turn. If we do this, we act alone. We will be risking not just our ships and crews, but possibly our standing in the galactic community. With respect, sir, said Reed, I believe our standing means little if we abandon our principles. Humanity joined the stars with a promise that we would be better out there than we sometimes were here on Earth. The president stopped walking and placed both hands on the table. What exactly are you proposing, Admiral? Reed touched a control, and the holographic display shifted to show a fleet formation. The 7th Expeditionary Force. 12 warships, 4 medical vessels, and 6 supply carriers. All volunteers. We position ourselves at Tellus 4, the most likely next target. We evacuate civilians if possible, and if the Vorn arrive, we show them that not everyone in this galaxy will stand aside. A defensive operation, the defense minister noted, not an attack. Exactly, Reed confirmed. We're not starting a war. We're preventing one. The room erupted in debate. Some argued for caution, others for even more aggressive action. President Wilson listened to all sides before raising his hand for silence. The history of humanity is filled with moments when good people did nothing in the face of evil, he said solemnly. I won't add our name to that list. He turned to Admiral Reed. You have authorization to deploy the 7th Expeditionary Force. Your mission is to protect civilian lives and establish a defensive perimeter. Engage the Vorn only if they attack. Reed nodded, her face grave but determined. Thank you, Mr. President. As the meeting ended, Miller approached Reed. The Alliance thinks we're the cowards of the galaxy. Reed's lips curved in a slight smile. Then they're in for a surprise. Sometimes, the most cautious species are the ones who understand exactly what's at stake. Within 6 hours, the 7th Fleet departed Earth orbit, heading toward the stars where danger, and perhaps humanity's true place in the galaxy, awaited. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Tellus system, engines glowing blue against the darkness of space. Admiral Reed stood on the bridge of the flagship UES Defiant, watching as the green and blue world of Tellus 4 appeared on the main view screen. Scanners show multiple settlements on the northern continent, reported Lieutenant Dave Rogers from the sensor station. Population approximately 8 million Tellurians. No major defense systems detected. Captain Miller, now serving as Reed's second-in-command, frowned. They're completely exposed. If the Vorn come here, it would be a slaughter. Reed nodded grimly. Deploy the fleet in standard defense formation. I want to make contact with the Tellurian government immediately. Within an hour, a delegation of Tellurians arrived on the Defiant. They were plant-like beings with bark-textured skin and leaf-like appendages that rustled when they moved. Their leader, Elder Root, bowed deeply to the humans. "We are honored by your presence," said Elder Root, his voice like rustling leaves, but also confused. "The Alliance Council informed us that no help would come." "The Council was wrong," Reed replied simply. "Earth decided to act independently." The Elder's eyes, like amber sap, widened in surprise. "You risk much by coming here. The Vorn are merciless. 3 neighboring systems have already fallen." Miller stepped forward. "That's why we're here. Our scanners suggest the Vorn fleet will reach Tellus 4 within 2 days. We can help evacuate your most vulnerable citizens and set up a defense perimeter." Elder Root looked at the humans with a mixture of hope and disbelief. The Alliance species call humans cautious to the point of cowardice. Yet you alone came to our aid. Reed smiled slightly. "Sometimes caution means preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. We've prepared. Now we hope the Vorn can be reasoned with." The Tellurians worked quickly with the human forces, evacuating children and elders to underground shelters. Defensive positions were established around major population centers. The human fleet spread out in a protective formation above the planet. On the 3rd day, alarms blared across all human ships. "Multiple warp signatures detected," called Rogers. 15. No, 20 vessels entering the system. The Vorn fleet materialized on the edge of the system. Massive, dark ships with jagged edges that resembled claws. They were 3 times the size of the human vessels and twice as numerous. "Open a channel," Reed ordered, straightening her uniform. The view screen flickered, revealing a being with gray, metallic skin and eyes that glowed red like burning coals. Bony ridges crowned its head, giving the appearance of a natural helmet. "I am General Krell of the Vorn Empire," the being said, its voice deep and grating. "This world has been claimed for Vorn expansion. Identify yourselves, intruders." Reed stepped forward. "Admiral Lisa Reed of the United Earth Fleet. Tellus 4 is a peaceful world under our protection. We request that you withdraw your forces from this system." General Krell's expression didn't change, but his eyes glowed brighter. "Humans, the cowards of the galaxy dare to challenge the Vorn Empire. Your reputation precedes you, always talking of safety protocols and risk assessments, while greater species shape the stars. We prefer to call it wisdom," Reed replied calmly. "And wisdom tells us that attacking innocent worlds isn't the path to true greatness." The Vorn general laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Lesser species exist to serve or be conquered. The Tellurians are weak. They will serve. And you will learn your place." Miller moved to Reed's side. "General, we don't wish for conflict, but we will defend this world. Return to your territory, and there need be no bloodshed." "Bloodshed is the way of the strong," Krell responded. "You have 1 hour to leave this system, or we will destroy your ships and take what is ours." The transmission cut off abruptly. Reed turned to face her bridge crew, all watching her for guidance. The moment of decision had arrived. "Battle stations," she said quietly. "Inform all ships. We stand our ground." The Vorn need to learn that sometimes the most cautious species are the ones most prepared for battle. As alarm klaxons sounded throughout the human fleet, Miller looked at Reed. "The Alliance won't come to help us." Reed nodded. "I know, but sometimes doing what's right means standing alone." The human ships moved into attack formation as the Vorn fleet advanced. Against all odds, humanity would make its stand here, among the stars. The Vorn warships advanced in perfect formation, their weapons ports glowing with deadly energy. Against the backdrop of Tellus 4's blue-green sphere, the human fleet looked hopelessly outmatched. "They're moving in a standard assault pattern," Miller observed, studying the tactical display. "Rigid, predictable, just as our intelligence suggested." Admiral Reed nodded. "Then we use that against them. All ships, execute maneuver Theta 6. The human fleet suddenly broke formation, ships darting in seemingly random directions. To the Vorn, it must have looked like panic, exactly what they expected from the cowardly humans. "The Vorn flagship is targeting us," Lieutenant Rogers reported as warning lights flashed across the bridge. "Energy weapons charging. Hold course," Reed commanded. "Wait for my mark." The first blasts from the Vorn ships tore through space, most missing their targets as the human vessels continued their erratic movements. The few hits that landed shook the smaller Earth ships violently. "Shields at 60%, shouted the tactical officer as the Defiant rocked from a direct hit. Reed gripped her command chair. "Now, all ships execute countermeasure package Alpha." From the underbellies of the human warships, hundreds of small objects scattered into space, filling the area between the two fleets with what appeared to be debris. "What are the humans doing?" General Krell demanded on the Vorn flagship. "Releasing trash into space will not save them." His question was answered seconds later when the debris suddenly activated, revealing themselves as autonomous drones. Each one emitted powerful electromagnetic pulses, temporarily disabling the guidance systems of nearby Vorn vessels. "Half their fleet is blind," Miller announced. "Strike Groups 1 and 2 attack the disabled ships. Strike Group 3 continue defensive operations above the Tellurian capital." The smaller, more agile human craft darted between the confused Vorn ships, targeting propulsion systems and weapons arrays with precision strikes. 3 Vorn battlecruisers drifted helplessly, their systems overloaded. But the advantage was short-lived. The remaining Vorn ships adjusted quickly, their superior firepower beginning to tell. 2 human frigates exploded in brilliant flashes of light, and a third limped away, trailing debris and atmosphere. "They're breaking through to the planet," Rogers reported grimly. 4 Vorn ships have bypassed our line and are heading for the surface. Reed's face hardened. "The Defiant will intercept." "Captain Miller, you have tactical command of the remaining fleet." "Admiral, the odds," Miller began, "are better than the Tellurians have without us," Reed finished. "Execute Order Firewall. You know what to do." The Defiant surged forward, placing itself between the advancing Vorn ships and the planet. Tellurian evacuation ships were still rising from the surface, filled with children and elders who couldn't be placed in the underground shelters. "Divert all power to forward shields," Reed ordered. "We need to buy those evacuation ships time." The Defiant shuddered as Vorn weapons fire slammed into it. Warning lights and alarms filled the bridge as systems began to fail. Shields failing. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. Meanwhile, Captain Miller coordinated the rest of the fleet. "All ships, execute Operation Firewall now." The human vessels suddenly broke off their individual engagements and regrouped at predetermined coordinates. From their cargo bays, they deployed what looked like small satellites. "What are they doing now?" Krell demanded. "Scan those devices." But before the Vorn could analyze the strange objects, Miller gave the order. "Activate the firewall." The satellites suddenly connected with energy beams, creating a net-like pattern across space. Then, in a synchronized maneuver, the human ships fired their engines at maximum thrust, pushing the energy net toward the heart of the Vorn fleet. As the net touched the first Vorn ship, it triggered a chain reaction. Hundreds of tactical nuclear mines hidden within the energy grid detonated simultaneously. The concentrated electromagnetic pulse from the explosions completely disabled the Vorn ship systems, leaving them dead in space. On the Defiant, Admiral Reed watched as the Vorn ships attacking the evacuation vessels suddenly went dark, their weapons falling silent. "The evacuation ships are clear," Rogers reported, relief evident in his voice despite his injuries. Operation Firewall worked. Reed smiled slightly, even as she surveyed the damage to her ship. Send a message to Earth. Tell them the Vorn fleet has been neutralized at Telesphore. Casualties are heavy, but the planet is secure. As the message was sent, the Tellurian Elder Root contacted the Defiant from the surface. You risked everything for us, he said, his voice trembling. The Alliance called humans cowards, yet you alone stood against the storm. Reed looked at her damaged bridge, at the faces of her injured but proud crew. Sometimes, she replied softly, true courage is knowing exactly what you might lose and standing up anyway. The Great Hall of the Galactic Alliance had never been so silent. The holographic display in the center of the chamber showed the aftermath of the Battle of Tellus. Disabled Vorn warships drifting in space, human vessels damaged but triumphant, and the planet below safe from conquest. Chairman Praetor stood frozen, his gray skin pale with shock. This information is confirmed. The Alliance intelligence officer nodded. Multiple sources verify, sir. The human fleet engaged the Vorn armada at Telesphore and achieved victory despite being outnumbered more than 2-1. Murmurs spread through the chamber as representatives from the 12 species tried to process this unexpected news. The Doraxian representative's 6 arms gestured in agitation. Impossible. The humans have only a fraction of our military experience. How could they defeat a Vorn battle group when even the combined might of the Alliance hesitated to engage? The elegant Thalaxian representative adjusted her shimmering veil, unable to hide her disbelief. Perhaps the reports are exaggerated. Humans have always been prone to embellishment. At that moment, the doors to the chamber slid open. Captain James Miller entered, still wearing his battle-scarred uniform. Parts of it were singed, and a bandage covered one side of his face. He walked with a slight limp, but held his head high. The reports, Miller said clearly, are actually understated. We lost 4 ships and nearly 800 crew members. But Telesphore and its 8 million inhabitants remain free. The council chamber erupted in voices, some demanding explanations, others expressing disbelief or concern. Chairman Praetor raised his hands for silence. Captain Miller, your actions violated Alliance protocol. Military intervention without council approval is strictly forbidden. Miller nodded. We were aware of the consequences when we made our decision. Earth accepts whatever penalties the council deems appropriate. That may be determined later, Praetor replied. First, we must understand the current situation. The Vorn will not take this defeat lightly. As if on cue, the central display changed. The face of General Krell appeared, his red eyes burning with hatred. To the cowards of the Alliance and the foolish humans who dare to oppose us, Krell began, his metallic voice echoing through the chamber. The actions at Telesphore will not go unanswered. The Vorn Empire now redirects its full attention to Earth. Your homeworld will be reduced to ash, your colonies harvested for slaves, and your species will serve as an example to all who resist our rightful expansion. The transmission ended, leaving the council in stunned silence. It seems Earth has brought the wrath of the Vorn upon itself, the Serpentine Vexor representative remarked coldly. Perhaps now you regret your hasty action. Miller looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each representative in turn. What we regret is that we stood alone, but we would make the same choice again. Before anyone could respond, Miller's communication device chimed. He checked it, then looked up with surprise. The United Earth government has just released an official response to the Vorn threat. It's being broadcast across all galactic frequencies. The central display activated again, showing President Wilson standing before the Earth flag. His voice was calm but resolute. To General Krell and the Vorn Empire, humanity acknowledges your declaration. Know this, Earth stands not just for itself, but for all peaceful species who wish to determine their own destiny. We stand with those who cannot stand alone. Your threats will not deter us from doing what is right. The transmission ended, and Miller turned back to the council. As we speak, Human fleets are deploying to Barium Prime and Nexus 3, the next likely Vorn targets. We will continue to defend innocent worlds, with or without Alliance support. Chairman Praetor looked troubled. Captain, surely you realize Earth cannot withstand the full might of the Vorn Empire. Perhaps not, Miller admitted, but we would rather fall fighting than survive by abandoning others. An aide rushed into the chamber and whispered urgently to Praetor. The chairman's eyes widened. It seems Earth's broadcast has had an unexpected effect, he announced. Reports indicate that refugee ships from dozens of worlds are changing course. They are heading toward Earth, seeking protection. Miller nodded, unsurprised. They're welcome. We'll do what we can for as many as we can. As he turned to leave, the Diraxian representative called out, "Why? Why would humans risk everything for strangers?" Miller paused at the doorway. Because that's what courage is. Not the absence of fear, but acting despite it. He looked back at the council one last time. The galaxy call us cowards. Perhaps it's time to reconsider that judgment. Dr. Thomas Walker moved carefully through the medical bay of the UES Defiant, now serving as both a hospital ship and a makeshift laboratory. Beds lined the walls, filled with wounded from the Battle of Tellus and the subsequent clashes at Barium Prime and Nexus 3. Amid the injured humans lay wounded aliens from a dozen different worlds, refugees who had joined the human resistance against the Vorn. "How is our patient today?" Walker asked, approaching a bed where a young Phylaxian lay recovering from surgery. The alien's shimmering skin had dulled with injury, but her eyes brightened at the doctor's approach. "Better, thanks to you. My people said humans were too fearful to make good doctors. They were wrong about many things." Walker smiled as he checked her vital signs. "Fear can be useful when it makes you careful. And right now, we need all the allies we can get." The latest reports from the front lines were grim. Though humans had secured several key systems, the Vorn Empire had responded with overwhelming force. 3 more human vessels had been lost in the past week alone. Earth itself was preparing for a possible attack. "Dr. Walker," called a voice from the laboratory section. "You need to see this immediately." Walker hurried to the lab where his research team, a mix of human scientists and volunteers from various refugee species, huddled around a display. "We were analyzing the blood samples from the different species," explained Dr. Patel, his chief assistant, "looking for ways to improve our medical treatments. But we found something unexpected." On the screen, cellular images from different alien species appeared side by side. "These genetic markers," Walker said slowly, "they're identical across all these different species. That's not possible through natural evolution." "Precisely," said Lex, a blue-skinned scientist from Nexus 3. "And when we compared them to human DNA, the difference became clear." He brought up another image. "Humans lack these markers entirely." Walker stared at the screen, his mind racing. Could these be artificial modifications? "Yes," confirmed Dr. Patel. "And they appear to be concentrated in areas that regulate fear responses and decision-making." The implications hit Walker like a physical blow. Someone altered these species, all of them. A deep voice spoke from the doorway. "Not someone. The Vorn." They turned to see Elder Root from Tellus 4, leaning heavily on a walking staff. His bark-like skin had grown paler during his time on the human ship. "What do you mean?" Walker asked. Elder Root moved closer, his amber eyes filled with shame. "There are ancient stories, legends we dismissed as myths. They tell of the time before the Alliance, when each of our species faced the Vorn alone. Each was conquered, then later released." "Released?" Patel questioned. "The stories say the Vorn broke our ancestors' will to fight, then allowed us to rebuild our civilizations under their watchful eye," Elder Root explained. "Over generations, the direct control faded, but something remained. Genetic tampering," Walker concluded. "They engineered a fear response specifically toward the Vorn. That's why the Alliance species hesitate to fight back. It's literally built into their DNA. And humans? Asked Lex. We evolved separately, Walker said. Earth was too distant, too isolated for the Vorn to reach during their earlier expansion. We never received the genetic modifications. The laboratory fell silent as the implications became clear. The Alliance isn't made of cowards, Walker said finally. They're victims of the most insidious form of control imaginable. Walker moved quickly to a communication terminal and contacted Admiral Reed, now coordinating Earth's defense from the rebuilt Defiant. Admiral, we've discovered why the Alliance species won't fight. It's not cultural, it's biological. The Vorn modify their ancestors to instill a genetic fear response. Reed's image looked thoughtful. Can you counteract it? Possibly, Walker replied. With enough time and resources, we might create a treatment to neutralize the artificial markers. Then that becomes our priority, Reed decided. If we can free the Alliance species from this hidden control, we'd have allies across the galaxy. It won't be easy, Walker warned. And we still need to hold out against the Vorn until the treatment is ready. Reed's expression hardened with determination. Then we'll do what humans have always done, Doctor. We'll stand our ground, fight smart, and protect those who need protection. As Walker returned to his work, he glanced at the wounded aliens sharing the medical bay with injured humans. For centuries, humanity had been mocked as the cowards of the galaxy because they planned carefully and avoided unnecessary risks. Now he understood the truth. Humanity's caution wasn't cowardice, it was freedom. Freedom from the invisible chains that bound the rest of the galaxy. Freedom to choose courage even when facing overwhelming odds. And soon, if his team succeeded, that freedom would spread throughout the stars. The bridge of the UES Defiant glowed with the light of 1,000 stars as it led the combined fleet toward the Vorn homeworld. Captain James Miller, now commanding the flagship since Admiral Reed coordinated the overall campaign from Earth, studied the tactical display with steady eyes. Beside him stood representatives from all 12 Alliance species, once unwilling to fight, now freed from their genetic chains, thanks to Dr. Walker's treatment. The cure had spread rapidly through the Alliance worlds, awakening a fury that had been suppressed for generations. Vorn Defense Fleet detected, announced Lieutenant Rogers, his uniform adorned with new battle decorations. 43 warships in defensive formation around their homeworld. The Diraxian commander, his 6 arms now bearing the weapons of his people, nodded grimly. Once, such a sight would have filled me with paralyzing terror. Now I feel only resolve. Miller looked at the diverse bridge crew, humans working alongside beings they had once thought cowardly, now united in purpose. All ships maintain formation. Remember the plan. We disable rather than destroy when possible. The Vorn people are not all responsible for their leader's actions. The Thalaxian commander, her veil replaced with battle armor, gestured toward the view screen. The Vorn have ruled through fear for too long. Today that ends. The combined fleet moved forward, hundreds of ships from dozens of worlds, all following the battle plans developed by human strategists. What the galaxy had mistaken for cowardice had actually been humanity's greatest strength. The ability to plan carefully, assess risks, and prepare for all possibilities. Enemy fleet is advancing, Rogers reported. They're using the same formations as in previous engagements. Miller nodded. As expected, the Vorn never adapted their tactics because they never needed to. Their enemies were programmed to fail. The first volleys of energy weapons flashed across space. The Alliance ships executed their carefully choreographed maneuvers, minimizing damage while positioning for the main assault. Human vessels darted between larger Alliance warships, deploying the countermeasures that had proven so effective at Telesphore. Operation Firewall is ready, Rogers announced. Miller looked at the representatives of the formerly subjugated species. This is your moment. Give the command. Together, they spoke as one. Execute Firewall. The same tactic that had saved Telesphore now deployed on a massive scale. Energy nets carrying thousands of electromagnetic pulse devices enveloped the Vorn fleet. Ship after ship went dark, weapons failing, engines dying. The carefully planned attack had neutralized half the Vorn fleet without destroying a single vessel. "Open a channel to the Vorn command center," Miller ordered. The view screen shifted to show General Krell, his metallic face contorted with rage. "This is impossible. The slave species cannot overcome their programming." "They're not slaves anymore," Miller replied calmly. "And they never were cowards. You just never gave them a fair fight." The Phylaxian commander stepped forward. "Your reign ends today, General. Surrender your forces, or we will be forced to destroy them." For the first time, uncertainty flashed in Krell's burning eyes. This cannot be happening. The humans were supposed to be the weak ones, the fearful ones. Miller shook his head. "You confused caution with cowardice, preparation with fear. Humanity didn't rush into conflicts because we understood their cost, not because we were afraid to pay it. The battle ended not with the destruction of the Vorn civilization, but with their surrender." As terms were negotiated, Dr. Walker discovered that the Vorn themselves had been genetically modified by their leaders, made more aggressive and less empathetic to create the perfect warrior race. 3 months later, representatives from all species, including reformed Vorn leaders, gathered on Earth to sign the new Alliance Charter. The Grand Hall in Geneva was filled with beings from across the galaxy, many visiting the human homeworld for the first time. Admiral Reed, her uniform bearing the new insignia of the Alliance Defense Force, addressed the gathering. "Today marks a new beginning. No longer will any species be judged as cowardly for valuing caution, nor glorified for reckless aggression. We have all learned that true courage comes in many forms." President Wilson signed the charter first, then passed the pen to representatives from each world. "Humanity is honored to serve alongside all of you, not as leaders, but as equals who happen to show that sometimes the most cautious approach is the bravest one." As the ceremony concluded, Captain Miller stood with Elder Root on a balcony overlooking the Swiss mountains. "Your people were called cowards," the Tellurian said softly, "yet you stepped forward when all others stepped back. History will remember this." Miller smiled as he watched ships from 100 worlds hovering peacefully in Earth's sky. Perhaps the galaxy will learn what humans have always known, that true courage isn't the absence of fear, but the wisdom to know when something is worth fighting for, and the determination to stand firm when that moment comes. In the stars above, the lights of alien vessels twinkled like new constellations, symbols of a galaxy forever changed, because the supposedly most fearful species had proven to be the bravest of all.